Got a little GK bass amp here in MBS. This was last here 5 years ago. And at that time I replaced the volume pot and resoldered some jacks that were a little bit loose. And now the limiter is not working and cuts in and out and pops when he does a switch. He thinks he dropped the amp and maybe a solder joint, so we'll take a look and see. Let's see if I remember how to get into one of these bad boys. So now let me make sure that this doesn't fall while I take everything off the front here. Well, frustratingly, there's a screw over here that's preventing the XLR from coming out, so I've got to take this front panel off. In theory, you can just take the front panel off and have access to the bottom of the board, but I want to take the board off the front panel as well. But got to do it a slightly harder way this way. All right. Because I'm such a nice guy, I'm also going to clean this. This is just full of funk here. That's better. Let's just put this stuff down for now. Well, this is what I remember. Things like this are not my work. This is from the factory. This wire is mine because there was a broken joint on this XLR, and I reflowed the input jack. Here's the limiter issue with the switch and this pot. I don't see any cracks in the solder joint, so that little joint there doesn't look too good. I'll reflow that real fast, and I'll reflow the pot. Then I'll show you some things on the other side that I noticed. As it came in, these two were bridged, and I assume there's a piece of wire there. But that bridge disappeared when I touched it with a soldering iron. Was that an unintentional bridging? Was that something that just kind of grew like a tin whisker? That could be the issue. I don't know. I can always bridge it more properly. Let's double check the solder joints here and there. Now the other side of this board is absolutely filthy, and it could just be some dirt between two components, and the dirt's got enough stuff in it to be yucky. And I'll clean out these switches. So let me put a paper towel down and just soak everything for a little bit and see where we're at when I put it back together. So much of this really is just being a thorough janitor as necessary. So I'm going to do some deoxit in the switches. Just a second, I'll confirm that that thing actually is switching with the meter. And I'm not at all worried about any of this deoxit from the switches running off into other things, for a reason I'll show you in just a minute. But first, let's just confirm that limiter switch is actually switching. That switch is working just fine. That doesn't mean that electronically everything sounds great yet. There may be some other cause, but it's not a solder joint, and the switch is clean on the inside now, or cleaner. So let me just get a whole bunch of the old dirt and yuck out of this thing. So flushing that deoxide off the board as well. And I'll give all the pots a cleaning with some fader lube in a minute, because that can solve all kinds of problems. And then I'll put it all together and see how things are going. I'll clean the jacks as well. But first I'm going to let this air dry. And the paper towel is just to minimize the mess on my bench. So I'm going to prop this up on this spool of solder. Let this set for about 15 minutes. We'll make a pot of coffee. That's the plan. All right, let's give all these pots a clean. Rotate them all a lot. And now let's get a cable plugged into the input jacks and give all those a little bit of a clean. This one probably doesn't need it. It's pretty new, but all right, so all the jacks and pots are clean. Pots are also lubricated in that process. The switches have been cleaned. And all the jack solder joints have been reflowed. I'm curious as to whether that switch that was bridged, whether that was a factory correction that they just did with a little bit of excess solder, whether that grew over time. That could be the faulty limiter switch, because there's not a trace connecting them on the board. So if I put this back together and it doesn't work right, I can put it back together in such a way that I can pull this out very easily and rebridge that if I need to. Huh, interesting. The limiter pot feels weird because the threads are stripped. Let me show you what I mean. Up top, there are normal threads. Down here, they get all smooth. And so the nut gets to that part and just goes round and round and round, and there's no mechanical support for this pot. I wonder if that was what was causing some stress. It is a 50K linear pot, and I'm pretty sure I have those, but I don't have those in a split shaft. Since this is relatively easy to take it back apart, let me test it as is, and then if I need to order that pot, I will. It's a $1.50 pot. The trouble is I don't stock split shafts. Well, actually, what I could do, since it does not have a knob on it either, so I can do this. Get this on here just for thickness. Get it on. And then I can put another nut on top of that that'll catch the fresh area of the bushing, where the threads are not stripped. And I'll lock it in place and hold this nice and tight, since it doesn't actually have a pot on it anyway, a knob on it anyway. So that's, if that pot works, that's what I'll do. If I need to replace that pot, 2 birds with 1 stone. All right, let's turn this thing on. There's no pop when I turn on the limiter now. So that's good. Let's see what it sounds like. Turn the master down, since it's right by the microphone and it's right in my face. I guess I'm hearing the limiter. It's hard to tell sometimes. Yeah, it's definitely working. A little bit of crackle. That's not the same thing as a pop, though. All right, so what we're running into now is that, this pot, because it's stripped, is not constantly making good pressure with the chassis, so the pot shell is not always grounded. Let me get another nut on there and see if that fixes it. I've got dozens of these little 16 millimeter pots, but I just don't have any of a split shaft. Anyway, the owner would like to be able to use this for a gig this Sunday, so I can order a replacement pot and we can revisit that. But if putting this on fixes his problem for his gig, I think he'll be very happy. Let's see if this fits on here. What's happening is the shell of the pot is not being pushed against the chassis, so it's not grounding. As I tighten that, it makes contact and then has a ground for shielding, and that's what's causing that noise. Let me give that a tighten, because that second nut grabbed fresh threads on there. Make sure all those are as tight as I trust them to be. I don't want to super tighten them, otherwise we'll have other pots that have strip threads. All right, that noise is gone. Rusty. I prefer the sound without the limiter, but it is working. So let me put the knobs on this, put the last screws back in place, and the owner will be very, very happy. But this is kind of a good example of, all right, on the service record, it says, hey, I cleaned all the pots, reflowed some solder joints, put one little nut on here. Looks like it sounds like it takes you 10 minutes to do, but to take this apart, diagnose everything, really make sure it's working right, takes a little bit more than 10 minutes. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching.